G'day Donna Downey fans, Fiona here with you to kickstart the very first Artist Gang Tuesday for 2017. Woohoo! For my first project I've created a little 8x8 inch canvas using a couple of my favourite Donna Downey signature stencils and a pretty wild poppy silhouette stamp. Okay, so I start here with some golden heavy gel matte medium, and I'm using it to stick down some ephemera that I've torn into smaller pieces. I've got some music pages here, a couple of old book pages. I've even got some old sewing patterns. These are going to form the basis of my collage. There's going to be many layers to this little canvas, but I want these little guys to peek through. So I'm making sure that the gel matte medium is going to cover the whole area. That'll give it lots of protection for when I start putting the other mediums on top. This project's a bit of an experiment for me. I love collage and I love layers. So I thought I'll put a few together. It's a bit of an old technique that I used to use in my scrapbooking, and I just wanted to see if I could transfer it onto a canvas. I really like to experiment, trying out new things, always looking for something different to add to my art. So as I cover this canvas with more and more ephemera, I'm starting to think, where am I going to place the stamp? And the stamp that I'm putting on here is not going to be stamped with ink. It's actually going to be stamped so that it creates an impression in some modelling paste. So I've started to hold the stamp over the top now so I can see where it's going to go. And that's where I'm going to put the majority of the ephemera that I want to see. Book pages are my favourite ephemera, so I really want to see the book pages poking through. As I apply my book pages, I put gel medium underneath and I put gel medium on top. And this makes sure that I've got a really good coating. It also makes sure it sticks down really well. There you go. I think that's about right. I'll just stick these loose edges and then we can go to the next stage. So before I can add the next layer, I do need to let this dry completely. I've popped mine outside because it's summer here and it's about 40 degrees Celsius. That's pretty warm, about 104 Fahrenheit for you guys. So it hasn't taken very long to dry. Now I'm adding a coat of heavy gesso with my palette knife. I'm just scraping it over the top. This will give me a good base for my stencil to go on. So for my background stencil, I've chosen the Anemone Duo from Donna Downey Studios. And I'm going to apply some golden high flow acrylic in the carbon black through the stencil. And I'm using a stippling effect just with my brush. So I reposition the stencil and I do the second flower, and in hindsight I could have actually wrapped the stencil around the edge of the canvas and included that stencil on the side. I love how when I watch these back I think, oh, I should have done that, but that's okay, I'll remember it for next time. Righto, so pop it aside and let it dry and we're ready for the next layer. This is some golden light modelling paste and I'm just going to mix a little bit of white gesso in with it. Now I've done this because I want to add more mediums over the top once it's dry, and so the gesso actually helps it have a bit more tooth and it stops the light modelling paste from being extra spongy. I'm applying it quite liberally to the canvas where I'm going to place the stamp. I need a really good coverage. For this technique to work, I need to have quite a thick layer of the modelling paste mixed with the gesso exactly where I want the stamp to go. So you'll see me line the stamp up on the canvas. I won't actually touch the canvas because of course the modelling paste is wet, but you'll see me line the stamp up a couple of times just to make sure that I am applying the right amount of modelling paste in the right area. So I popped it aside to dry. And you can see I can move it around with my thumb, but it doesn't actually stick. So that means that the top coat is dry, but that it's still wet underneath. This is exactly how you need it to impress the stamp into it. Now, stamping onto a canvas is never easy because of course it's got flexibility. So often what I'll do is I'll just turn it upside down and push it from the inside so that you get a really good even pressure. Now we'll know whether I've waited long enough. Oh, just. Can you see that? There's probably still a little bit too much moisture in there, but I can work with that. So now I'll begin removing some of that excess modelling paste on the inside of that stamp with a cotton tip or a cotton bud, and I'm just using a little bit of water to help move that out. Now because we put gel medium underneath it, it's got a really good surface now for me to be able to just scrape that modelling paste off of with a little bit of water, and that's going to expose the book pages underneath. It's a little bit fiddly, Just follow the pattern of the stamp that's been impressed into the modelling paste. It can take a little while. I use the stamp next to me here as a reference just to make sure I don't miss any key areas of the pattern, but it's definitely worth the while. So I also use the edge of my palette knife just to get the really fine lines and the edges, and there we go, all scraped out. Now to start defining the shape of the stamp, and I'm using a black Stabilo soluble watercolour pencil. I'm using this because of course it's reactive with water, so once I've applied it then I can get my brush with some water on it and I can help the edges bloom. I also continue this out onto the dry modelling paste, onto the rest of the canvas. It's quite white, and the more I move the black around the poppies, the more I realised how white the background is. So I added some of the already dark grey water onto the background just to give it a bit of subtleness, and wipe a little bit off with a wipe. And then using a water-soluble graphite pencil, this is quite a chunky one, I'm going around the outside and giving it a little bit of a frame. So now it's time to add a little bit of colour, and I'm using some Liquitex ink here. Any water-soluble ink will work. The Pigment Eyes ink will work as well. And I've decided that I'm going to go with a red colour because I want to make them look like little poppies. Once the colour is added, I'll pop it aside to dry. Once the ink is all dried, the next layer is some oil pastels. I'm really loving working with oil pastels at the moment. It's a new medium for me. I haven't really tried them much, and I really want to get used to how they work. I found that they blended really well over the top of the modelling paste once it was dry, and I'm starting to like the way this is coming together. This feature around the stamp is really going to help make those poppies stand out. Ever so slowly I'm starting to lose my fear of adding black to my projects, and I'm also getting the confidence that if it is too dark then I can always lighten it up. And this is exactly what I'm going to do now. I've got some gesso and I'm going to lighten over the top of the black areas. I'm not going to cover them up completely because I do like the shadow that it creates, but I do want to tone them down a little bit. So my technique for this is to grab a little bit of gesso on my finger and then to lightly rub it over the top of the raised areas. Every now and then I get into the little grooves and lighten up the dark shadow, but generally 9 times out of 10 it's just skimming over the top. Now here I'm back with the black Stabilo again and some water just to define the inside of those poppies. I found that I'd lost it a bit. I also wanted to add some interest in the foreground, so I've got the signature stencil grass from Donna Downey, and I'm just adding some of the black high flow paint through it again with that stippling effect with that grass over the top. It's going to make a really great foreground for my canvas. Time for another layer. So some more white gesso over the top. Here I'm just very lightly adding it to the highest raised areas that are left from the modelling paste after I impressed the stamp in. And as we do this, what you'll find is that the black foreground is going to come further and further forward. Just getting it in all the little grooves and over the top of that poppy stamp to really make it stand out. Now here I go again with another crazy concoction of light modelling paste, and this time I've got some gold ink, some drawing ink. I'm going to mix the two together, and what I want to do is I want to just give this a little bit of a brown tone. I don't want it to be too gold, which is why I'm mixing the modelling paste in with it, and I'm just rubbing it lightly into the background so it's going into all of the grooves. And then with a dry brush I'm just going to lightly brush a very, very thin coating over the top, and then rubbing it into all the little grooves with my fingers. It's giving the whole piece more of an earthy tone. So at this point I'm really liking how much the gold is lifting this whole piece. So I've added some splats with the gold ink in my brush. And then I'm doing that thing that I never do well. I'm going to leave it alone because I'm calling it done. Thank you so much for hanging out with me here at Donna Downey's Artist Gang, and I'll see you all again soon. Cheers!